Look, none of what you're about to hear will save your life, land you a job, or make you any smarter in the ways that matter. But you're gonna remember them anyway. One fact involves the CIA, terrorists, and chickpeas. Another one proves that even bleach has an expiration date, and there's a guy on this list who helped improve the electric chair only to end up sitting in it himself. I'm Mike with List 25, and these are 25 completely unnecessary facts you'll be glad you know. 25. Bleach goes bad faster than you think. That bottle of bleach sitting under your sink right now might already be useless, and you'd have no idea. Liquid chlorine bleach contains sodium hypochlorite, which breaks down over time even when the bottle is sealed. After about 6 months, it starts losing strength. Once you crack it open, air, light, and heat speed up the whole process. The chemical slowly converts into plain old salt and water, which means the liquid still looks fine, but does absolutely nothing useful when you try to sanitize your countertops. This explains why older bleach sometimes fails to whiten clothes or clean surfaces, even when you use twice as much. You're pouring glorified salt water on your problems and wondering why they don't go away. The fix is simple. Buy smaller bottles more often and store them somewhere cool and dark. 24. Japan doesn't tell death row inmates when they'll be executed. Prisoners on Japan's death row often wait years, sometimes decades, for a sentence to be carried out. But they'll never know which morning will be their last. Inmates are only told about their execution on the day it happens, usually just hours before. There's no final legal appeal window and barely enough time to say goodbye. The system has drawn criticism from international human rights organizations who argue that years of psychological uncertainty amounts to a form of cruelty on its own. Prisoners wake up every single day unsure if they'll see another one. Whether you think that's justice or inhumanity probably depends on how you feel about the crimes that got them there in the first place. Either way, it's a policy most of the world doesn't follow. 23. The Washington Monument is capped with what was once a precious metal. When the Washington Monument was finished in 1884, engineers placed a tiny aluminum pyramid at the very top. Back then, aluminum was so rare and expensive that it rivaled silver. The pyramid was only 5.6 inches tall and weighed just under 6 pounds, but it was the largest single piece of aluminum ever cast. Before modern extraction methods came along, producing aluminum required enormous effort and resources. Using it for the monument's tip was meant to show off American technological achievement while also serving a practical purpose. That little pyramid works as a lightning rod. Today, aluminum shows up in soda cans and kitchen foil. Back then, placing it on top of the nation's tallest structure was like crowning it with treasure. 22. Picasso shot blanks at people who annoyed him. Pablo Picasso was known for pushing boundaries on canvas, but he also did it in person. According to several stories from friends and associates, Picasso carried a Browning pistol loaded with blanks, and he wasn't shy about using it. If someone bored him at a party or insulted his hero, Paul Cézanne, Picasso would pull out the gun and fire. Nobody ever got physically hurt, but that was never the point. The gesture was pure theater, a way to shock people and make an exit that nobody would forget. It reflected his personality perfectly. Dramatic, unpredictable, and completely uninterested in social norms. Whether you think that's brilliant or ridiculous, probably says more about you than about him. And this is Picasso, that's why he's here. Say hi, Pika. 21. Iceland fought a supermarket chain over its own name. In 2016, Iceland, the country, sued Iceland Foods, a British grocery chain that had been using the name since the 1970s. The supermarket had tried to block Icelandic business from using the word Iceland in their branding across the European Union, which struck the actual nation as a bit much. Iceland's government argued that no private company should have exclusive rights to a country's name. The EU Intellectual Property Office agreed, ruling that Iceland was geographically descriptive and couldn't be monopolized. The supermarket's trademarks were invalidated. It was a rare case of a country going toe-to-toe with a corporate brand and walking away with the win. 20. British commandos trained with real bullets flying past them. World War II pushed military training to extremes that would never fly today. British commando instructors used live fire exercises where real ammunition was shot just a few feet away from soldiers who exposed themselves unnecessarily during drills. The idea wasn't punishment, it was conditioning. Trainers wanted their men to develop instant reflexes. If a recruit popped up at the wrong moment, the crack of a bullet passing nearby taught him not to do it again. The method was brutal and dangerous, but veterans credited it with keeping them alive in actual combat. When every instinct tells you to stay low, hesitation disappears. It's the kind of training that sounds insane until you hear soldiers say it saved their lives. 19. Formula One limits how much computing power teams can use. Formula One racing is as much about technology as it is about driving, but the sport places hard limits on how much computing power teams can throw at car development. Under the aerodynamic testing restrictions, each team is capped at 25 teraflops for aerodynamic simulations. For context, that's a lot of processing power, but far less than what wealthy teams could afford to deploy. The rule exists to keep competition fair. Without the cap, the richest teams would simply outcompute everyone else, running millions more simulations and perfecting every tiny detail. With the restrictions in place, engineers have to be smarter about how they use their resources. It's a rare case where sports regulations actually force teams to work within creative limits instead of just outspending the competition. 18. There's a lake in Antarctica that never freezes. Deep Lake sits in East Antarctica, and despite air temperatures that can drop below negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit, its water stays liquid all year round. The secret is salt. Deep Lake is roughly 10 times saltier than the ocean, which lowers the freezing point so dramatically that ice never forms. The environment is too harsh for almost anything to survive. Only a few highly specialized microorganisms can tolerate the conditions. Scientists study the lake because it offers clues about life's limits on Earth, and potentially on other planets. If anything can survive in Deep Lake, maybe something similar is surviving somewhere else in the universe. 17. JFK didn't invite Sammy Davis Jr. to his inauguration because of his marriage. When John F. Kennedy was inaugurated in 1961, one of the biggest entertainers of the era was conspicuously absent. Sammy Davis Jr. wasn't invited to perform or attend, and according to historical accounts, the reason came down to his marriage to a white woman. Kennedy reportedly worried that Southern politicians would react badly if Davis showed up. The decision caused immediate backlash in Hollywood circles. Dean Martin, one of Davis's closest friends, refused to attend the inauguration in protest. The whole episode highlighted the tension between Kennedy's public image and the political calculations happening behind the scenes. Civil rights was a complicated issue for the administration, and Davis ended up on the wrong side of that calculation. 16. More than 300 types of headaches exist. If you've ever assumed all headaches are more or less the same, well, medical researchers would like a word. There are over 300 recognized headache types, and only about 10% of them can be traced back to a specific underlying cause like injury, infection, or vascular problems. The rest just happen because something in your nervous system decided to misbehave. The pain doesn't come from your brain or skull. Both lack the nerve endings that register pain. Instead, headaches originate in surrounding structures like blood vessels, muscles, nerves, and connective tissues. Chemical imbalances can also throw off pain signaling and make your head feel like it's being squeezed in a vice. So next time someone tells you to just drink water, you can let them know it's probably more complicated than that. 15. George Wallace spent his final years apologizing for segregation. George Wallace is remembered for standing in a schoolhouse doorway and declaring, "Segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever." That speech defined his early career and made him a symbol of resistance to civil rights. What fewer people know is that he spent his later years walking it all back. By the 80s, Wallace had publicly renounced his segregationist views and apologized to African American communities across Alabama. More than that, he appointed unprecedented numbers of African Americans to state government positions, including his own cabinet. Whether you believe the change of heart was genuine or politically convenient depends on who you ask. But the man who once stood for segregation eventually stood against it, and that reversal became part of his legacy too. 14. Visa once offered restaurants cash to stop accepting cash. In 2017, Visa ran an experiment that sounded like the setup for a financial dystopia movie. The company offered up to 50 small restaurants $10,000 each if they agreed to stop accepting cash entirely and go card only. The idea was to push more transactions through electronic payment systems, which Visa obviously benefits from. Some vendors took the deal, but others hesitated. Turning away cash means turning away customers who don't have cards or prefer not to use them. The fees associated with card processing also cut into already thin profit margins. Still, the promotion made headlines and signaled how aggressively some financial companies are pushing for a cashless future. Whether that's convenient or creepy probably depends on how you feel about handing over more data every time you buy lunch. 13. The AK-47 appears on multiple national flags. You wouldn't expect a firearm to show up on an official government symbol, but the AK-47 has earned that spot in a few places. Mozambique put it right on their flag. Zimbabwe and East Timor worked it into their coats of arms. And once you know the history, it actually makes sense. These countries didn't gain independence by asking nicely. Armed struggle was part of how they became free, and the AK-47 was the tool that made it happen. Putting it on a flag isn't about celebrating violence, it's about remembering what the fight cost and what it won. The rifle became wrapped up in national pride the same way other countries use eagles or lions. It just so happens to be a gun instead of an animal. 12. Christmas lights were once so expensive that families rented them. In the early 20th century, having an electrically lit Christmas tree wasn't just festive, it was a status symbol. Electric lights were wildly expensive, and electricity itself was still a novelty for many households. Most families couldn't afford to buy strings of lights outright, so they rented them for the holiday season instead. Displaying a growing tree signaled wealth, modernity, and a certain level of sophistication. If your neighbors saw lights in your window, they knew you had arrived. The practice faded as mass production drove prices down and electricity became standard in homes. But for a few decades, those twinkling lights were less about holiday cheer and more about showing off. Although now they're probably both. 11. A prisoner improved the electric chair and then died in it. Charles Justice was serving time in prison when he earned early parole by contributing improvements to the electric chair. His innovation involved replacing leather wrist straps with metal restraints, a modification the state considered useful enough to reward him with freedom. What happened next sounds like a Greek tragedy. Months after his release, Justice was convicted of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to face the same device he had helped refine. The irony wasn't lost on anyone at the time, and the case has stuck around as a grim example of unintended consequences. Whether you see it as poetic justice or cruel coincidence, the story is hard to forget. 10. Nuclear submarines once used wood for their propeller bearings. Before synthetic materials took over, engineers turned to nature for one of the most demanding jobs in maritime technology. Lignum vitae, an extremely dense tropical wood, was used to make propeller shaft bearings for ships and submarines. The wood's natural oils made it self-lubricating and resistant to water, friction, and wear. The bearings could handle constant rotation and heavy loads in wet environments without metal-on-metal grinding. They worked so well that it was used in naval vessels for decades, including some early nuclear submarines. Modern composites and polymers have since replaced it, but the wood's unique properties made it essential to maritime engineering during a critical era. 9. Some monks lived on top of pillars for decades. Stylitism was a form of extreme religious devotion practiced by early Christian monks who wanted to get as far from the world as possible without leaving it. These men, called stylites, climbed onto tall pillars and stayed there for months, years, or even decades. One of the most famous reportedly remained on his pillar for 54 years without ever coming down. The practice was meant to separate the monk from earthly distractions while enduring physical hardship as a proof of spiritual dedication. Rain, wind, sun, cold, they took it all. Visitors would come up just to look up at them and ask for blessings. Whether you see that as inspiring or extreme probably depends on your views about self-denial. Either way, it's a commitment most of us cannot fathom. 8. The CIA is legally barred from spying on Americans. By law, the Central Intelligence Agency cannot collect intelligence on the US government, American citizens, resident aliens, legal immigrants, or companies based in the United States, no matter where those people or organizations happen to be in the world. The restriction exists to keep the agency focused on foreign intelligence and out of domestic surveillance. That doesn't mean Americans can't be monitored at all. It just means the CIA isn't the one doing it. Domestic intelligence falls to agencies like the FBI, which operate under different rules and require court authorization in many cases. The separation is supposed to protect constitutional rights, though critics argue that loopholes and workarounds have blurred the lines over the years. 7. China bred giant pigs to survive a pork shortage. African swine fever tore through China in 2019, and it took millions of pigs with it. That's a massive problem in a country where pork is basically a food group. Prices went through the roof almost overnight, and farmers had to figure out how to keep up with demand when half their livestock was gone. Some of them got creative. Instead of raising more pigs, they raised bigger ones. I'm talking animals that tip the scales at over 1,100 pounds, which puts them in polar bear territory. A single pig could fetch more than $1,400 at market, so the math worked out even if the photos looked ridiculous. These things resembled small hippos waddling around the farm. When your industry collapses overnight, you do whatever you can to keep the lights on. 6. Woodstock 99 had a sanitation problem no one talks about. Woodstock 99 was supposed to be a celebration of music and peace, a callback to the original 1969 festival. What it became was a logistical disaster remembered more for its failures than its lineup. The event was vastly unprepared for the crowd, and sanitation collapsed almost immediately. The portable toilets gave out early, and the July heat made everything worse. Attendees who wanted relief from the sun jumped into the mud pits to cool down. What most of them didn't know was that sewage from the overflowing facilities had seeped into that same mud. Thousands of people ended up splashing around in contaminated sludge. Trench mouth and trench foot spread through the crowd. Infections usually associated with soldiers in wartime, not concert goers. Nobody involved in planning that festival should be allowed near an event ever again. And there's a great little write-up about the Limp Bizkit issue. Not really their fault when you look at it. 5. The CIA once tried to scare guerrillas with vampire folklore. This one sounds made up, but it's not. Back in the 50s, the CIA was fighting communist guerrillas in the Philippines, and somebody decided to get weird with it. Local villagers had deep-rooted fears in aswangs, those vampire-like monsters from Filipino legend that supposedly hunted evil people. So, American operatives leaned into that. They grabbed a body, drained the blood out of it, and poked 2 holes in the neck to make it look like a creature attack. Then they left it somewhere the hook balahap fighters would stumble across it. Word travels fast in the jungle, and soon enough, guerrillas were whispering about monsters picking off their men one by one. Some packed up and left the area entirely. The CIA basically used a ghost story to win a battle. Creepy, effective, and absolutely unhinged all at the same time. 4. There's a game show host whose identity is legally hidden. The trivia game show Inquisition, see what they did there, has a strange claim to fame. Its host has never been publicly identified, and contractual agreements prevent anyone involved with the show from revealing who he is. That level of secrecy isn't common in television, where hosts typically become the face of their programs. Despite the anonymity, the host's voice, style, and presence have become instantly recognizable to fans. The mystery has become part of the show's appeal rather than a drawback. It proves that personality can carry a program even when nobody knows who actually is delivering it. Whether the secrecy is a gimmick or a genuine privacy choice remains unclear, but it's worked so far. 3. Plumbers and the Day After Thanksgiving. The Day After Thanksgiving has a nickname in the plumbing industry, and it's exactly what you think it is. Brown Friday marks the busiest day of the year for emergency plumbing calls, thanks to a perfect storm of rich meals, large gatherings, and overworked pipes. Overeating, combined with foods high in fats and fiber, puts extra strain on household plumbing. Multiply that by a house full of guests, and systems that usually handle one family start failing under the pressure. Clogged drains, backed up toilets, and overrun septic tanks become routine emergencies. It's a less glamorous companion to Black Friday, but for plumbers, it's the day that keeps the business running all year. 2. A type of corn in Mexico makes its own fertilizer. Sierra Miche corn grows in the highlands of Oaxaca, and it does something almost no other crop can do. It thrives in nitrogen-depleted soil without synthetic fertilizer. The secret is a set of aerial roots that produce a thick, sugary mucus. That mucus creates the perfect environment for nitrogen-fixing bacteria, which convert nitrogen from the air into a form the plant can use. The corn essentially fertilizes itself. Researchers are now trying to crack the code on how this works so they can apply it to other crops. Chemical fertilizers wreck ecosystems, pollute waterways, and cost farmers a fortune. If wheat or rice could pull off the same trick, farming would look completely different in 20 years. 1. Cyber Monday exists because home internet used to be terrible. And finally, Cyber Monday started because people couldn't shop from home. In the early 2000s, most households were still stuck on dial-up, which made browsing retail websites painfully slow, if not impossible. Media-heavy shopping pages took forever to load, and placing orders often timed out halfway through checkout. When people returned to work after Thanksgiving, they finally had access to fast, reliable internet through their employers. Retailers noticed the spike in traffic on that Monday and started promoting sales to match the demand. What began as a workaround for poor infrastructure turned into one of the biggest online shopping days of the year. Now that most people have broadband at home, the original reason barely matters anymore, but the holiday stuck. And there you have it. 25 facts you didn't need but probably won't forget. Today's list proves that reality doesn't need permission to get weird. And if your brain is hungry for more, click here to check out 25 fascinating Today I Learned facts that'll blow your mind. It starts with a guide horse named Panda and only gets stranger from there. That's it for today. If you enjoyed it, hit that subscribe button or ring that notification bell so you do not miss what's coming next. Thank you guys so much. Also like, share, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.